Hi, I'm Vaughn Studer. I'm the CEO of Engrain. We get asked by customers a lot about what are our recommendations for dosing eMAX and how might we consider the right dose for an energy reduction strategy that we might be trying to implement. And so I'm going to cover today recommendations and things that we see with our customers that are working in poultry, in broilers, layers, and then also in pullets and development and breeder replacements. So when we think about broilers, if we have a classic setup with maybe a starter for 10 to 14 days and then a grower and then maybe a kind of a 21 to whenever harvest for finishers, let's use those three different diet phases to also phase in our eMAX and the energy reduction that we want to do. So eMAX 100, the number in the name 100 means that's the dose, 100 parts per million that we recommend. But in the starter phases, we have had good experience going higher than that for these short periods of time. It's important to understand that it takes a little bit of time for the bacillus organisms to fully germinate and vegetate and become present throughout the bird. And so if we had a 14-day starter, I would just start with 100 parts per million during that phase, but I wouldn't do any energy reduction there. Let's give the bird time to get started and then get acclimated with the full load of bacillus organisms. We've had success with people that have maybe there's a disease issue that they're worried about, or maybe that starter is even more compressed. Maybe it's only 7 days or 10 days. And in those situations, I would not hesitate to go at 2x or 3x levels, either 200 ppm, 300 ppm. And we can do that there without much added cost because as a percentage of the feed the bird will eat in its lifetime, it's a very small percentage in those first few days. So we can spend the money there and really it doesn't impact us in the total cost of the bird. So if you have a very short starter period, I would consider a 2x or 3x dose just in that phase, a little longer 14-day or beyond before we do any kind of energy reduction. Then if we have a little longer starter phase, 14 days, then 100 parts per million is probably sufficient before then we can start an energy reduction in that grower and finisher. When we get into the grower, most often we look at about a 2% reduction in metabolizable energy there from what the baseline formulation would be. And that would set us up then in the finisher to do a 3 or 4% reduction. We have numerous studies to confirm that those are good levels if we're kind of already starting around that 3,000 kcal per kilogram level. eMAX is also suitable to put into water. Again, before with an energy reduction, you're talking about a feed application, but a lot of people don't have the opportunity maybe to have total control of their feed and would like to use it as a water application. And in that case, it works very well against pathogen, but I would not do an energy reduction where I'm putting the water because I really like the idea that we've tied the energy reduction of the feed together with the dosage in the feed. But again, for a water application, 100 parts per million equivalent in water, that would be 100 grams per 1,000 liters of water is 100 parts per million. So 1,000 liters is the same weight as a metric ton of feed. So 1,000 grams of eMAX per 1,000 liters. And again, we have the same opportunity here. If we have a starter group and we have issues with pathogenic E. coli or salmonella that we're concerned about there. So I want to go back and I want to talk about water. So eMAX works also as a water application. Now when we dose in water, if we're thinking about kind of getting in the same level as we would with feed level 100 parts per million, realizing it with water, in most cases, birds are going to drink 2 to 3 to 4 times more water than they eat in weight of feed. We can adjust our eMAX level accordingly. So let's be a conservative level and say they drink twice as much water as they eat feed. And so instead of 100 parts per million, or 100 grams per 1,000 liters, which is 1,000 liters is the equivalent of a metric ton, we would cut that dose in half, 50. So, and then if we were saying birds drank 3 times as much water as feed, then we'd be looking at 33. So when you're doing a water application, it is important for you to understand how much water your birds are drinking to get that dosage right. But again, we'll take a conservative estimate and say they drink 2x the amount of water that they eat. And so we would be dosing them at 50 grams per 1,000 liters of water. And this same opportunity exists here with starter birds. If we have a pathogenic E. coli or salmonella that we're worried about early in the production phase, then maybe we stay with 100 grams and for that first starter phase, whatever it is, 7, 10, 14 days. And then give us a chance to get a good start with those birds, and then we end up with the 100 gram level after that. With all of these strategies, it's important to consider that we have to be very careful with any other drugs that we might be putting into the program. So traditional antibiotics like avelamycin, seleniumycin, those types of things are not going to be compatible with a bacillus treatment. It simply doesn't kill the bacillus; it just doesn't let them come out of their spore. We have identified a number of anticoccidial products that are compatible with eMAX, so please contact us to talk about that, because we can help guide you through which ones of those products would be a good fit if you also felt you still needed to feed some type or put in the water some type of anticoccidial. So looking at layers, we've been less aggressive with energy reduction in layers, only because it's interesting what we see is when we begin feeding eMAX with the bacillus program, we simply make more eggs. There is something produced that is triggering egg production there. And so our egg production trends up, and if for more eggs, if we're also trying to do an energy reduction there, oftentimes we're getting hens that are just too thin at the end of the lay cycle. So I'm a little more careful with energy reduction layers, but I certainly see the opportunity to increase profitability through egg production. A couple of strategies with layers that I've seen our customers use with some success. One of the ways is how do we hold the persistency of peak production in the lay cycle? And so if our peak is around 30 weeks where we get close to 100% efficiency, let's see if we can do a couple of things. One, maybe we want to see if we can get to that peak sooner. Maybe we want to increase or get it to 25 weeks instead of 30 weeks. And so if that's the case, then we would want to begin to feed eMAX at the very beginning of the lay cycle, right when those hens are getting started, and see if we can get a faster peak and maybe even get larger eggs in that early cycle, more higher case weights early on, more saleable eggs. If we're trying to look at just the persistency of production, and let's say 30 weeks is our normal peak, then we would want to start eMAX that 21 days prior to that. So 3 weeks prior to expected peak. And maybe if we're trying to do a bit of a catch up there, maybe the 2x dose, 200 ppm would be good there. But the thing with layers, because we have such a long, almost 2-year process with the hens, I don't know that it's a good economic strategy to say I'm going to feed eMAX through the entire lay cycle. And so I'm looking at different strategies to where you can feed it for periods of time, and maybe that gets you what you want without having the expense through the whole, say, 94 weeks. So we can use it to maybe increase our ramp up, a little more saleable eggs faster, higher case weights, bring the peak sooner. But then the second strategy again is if we're a couple of weeks prior to peak, because we've seen customers that have done this that have then hit their peak efficiency, and those birds have stayed at that almost through that 52-week first year period, when they before had been experiencing a steady decline in persistency off of that. And so that area under the curve is a lot of eggs. And so If that is my strategy, I'm going to again start a couple of weeks prior to my peak production. I'm going to feed it all the way through until I start to see that persistency decline. And that may mean I feed it for 20, 25, 30 weeks. And we might at that time also have enough bacillus built into the bird and have the birds in good and the hens in good body condition that maybe then after peak production we can look at a very modest energy reduction, say 1 or 2%. And maybe that's all you want to do. Maybe you just want to feed it at the tail end of, or in that last year of the lay cycle, at that 100 parts per million level, and be able to just say I'm going to reduce energy in the tail end of that production to where I don't overfeed hens, and I can end up with a cheaper diet cost and cheaper cost per dozen eggs. So pullet and breeder development, we have studies showing good results with energy reduction in this pullet phase. Again, I treat these really like a broiler. I'm going to have for the first 14, 21 days, I'm going to have this starter phase where I don't reduce the energy, but I'm also going to begin the eMAX there. And then once we get out of that starter window, then I'm going to look at a very modest energy reduction, maybe 2%. Those are the levels we've seen work since we've got maybe an 16, 18 week period during that. But we can save significant amount of money with even a 2% energy reduction after we get through that starter phase. And again, the same thing, if our starter phase is much shorter than that 14, 21 days, maybe we're at 7 or 10 days. And again, maybe we also have a disease issue that we are trying to clean up. I would consider a 2x or 3x level just in that very short period of time. So I hope this gives you some ideas about different ways you can use eMAX as an energy reduction tool, maybe an alternate way to use it in the water as a pathogen reduction, and then understanding the various issues around how do we really get birds started on this. So please go when you're at the website, hit the button talk to us, or send an email at info@engrain.us. And if you have questions or interest and would like to talk to myself or anybody on our eMAX team, we'd be happy to address these issues in the context of your current program. Thank you.